unmuted, and we're back here for Michigan Wolverines Live, the 98th episode, folks, July 12th, 2023. And my name is John Diadamo. I'm going to be your host today. Feel free to DM me at John Diadamo. Send me stuff, as some of our regulars do from time to time, and it might show up on air. We already have some great comments. Thanks to our buddy Jason and Dennis for showing up. He's a big fan of our guest. So real quick, like, subscribe, share this with a friend, share it with a neighbor, share it with your Uncle Ronnie. I don't care. Just share it around because this is obviously we're very excited to have a special guest today, Dennis FITHIAN from Maize and Blue Review. Dennis, welcome to the show.
Well, it's good to be here. I never pass up a chance that I can remember to talk about Michigan. So here it is. People calling this the dog days of summer, and yet, you start talking college football, it gets people pretty fired up.
Absolutely. And, here at the Voice of College Football, we're always revving up some topics, and it's always great to have somebody that I know a decent chunk of our community also watches. And I had multiple people from the community be like, when are you going to have Dennis on? And I'm like, we're going to have Dennis on. Trust me. And so here we go. So by popular demand, here you are. So real quick, before we get started on topics, we'll do this at the beginning and the end, but just if you can let people know, for those who are living under maybe a Maize and Blue rock at somewhere, where can people find you?
Well, I do a show weekdays, except in the summer, I've broken it up a little bit where I do 3 days a week, but 1:00 Eastern, Good Afternoon, Michigan Football, part of the Rivals Network. You can find it there at Maize and Blue Review, Michigan Rivals, or on my Twitter page. And we're talking about the latest in Michigan sports every day at 1:00. And we have been on over a year and a half, and it seems like there hasn't been a day where there hasn't really been something to talk about. So credit Michigan for keep pulling out and, being able to throw stuff out there that gives us the content to talk about.
And you know what? One thing about Michigan, whether Michigan is up or down, the one thing you always know is with Harbaugh, it's going to be entertaining. You know that for sure.
Yeah, well, he's had a great turnaround. Yeah, there wasn't so many people. You say a lot of things to talk about. There's mostly a lot of negative things to talk about after that pandemic season, but I remember my brother-in-law, we were going to the movies on Christmas night, and he was talking about maybe Michigan should just go out there and start buying and play. He was something. He was fed up. Yeah. And I said, what if he turns it around? He said, if he turns it around, he'll live up to his name, Captain Comeback that he had with the Colts. And what a great story it would be. And, he hasn't reached the total summit of the mountaintop, but, he's set up in a pretty good spot. And these last 2 years were, I don't know, you don't like to throw around the word great too much. They're close to great. Beating Ohio State, one of the Big Ten, about as good as it gets. But, they still have some unfinished business. But, yeah, Harbaugh, you're right. He's got a lot to talk about. But, in the last 2 years, it's mostly a lot of positive stuff.
Absolutely. And speaking of unfinished business, we've been hearing from various reports and various people, hey, look out for Georgia, look out for Alabama to come back and all of these things. But with Michigan returning 81% production, I'm not surprised by this take here from Phil Steele that 2023 is Harbaugh's best team at Michigan. So, Dennis, you actually spoke to Phil Steele about this. So I'd love to kind of hear how that went and kind of his thought process.
Yeah, and I agreed with Phil Steele, and that was good because I've been talking about Michigan and looking at them. And if I had a vote in the preseason poll, I would put Georgia up top, even though they don't have their quarterback and the talent that they have. And because they won it the last 2 years and just looking at the road, I would have had them number one, but I'd had Michigan number two. I look at everybody else and, having a quarterback coming back is a pretty big deal. And I know Clemson does technically have a quarterback coming back, but I like, and I know maybe coming up we'll talk about J.J. McCarthy. I like where Michigan's sitting with their returning junior quarterback. That's why I had him number two. I don't think you could put Ohio State in front of Michigan at two. I don't know. You seems like you can always put Alabama at number one if you want, but I wouldn't put them in front of Michigan either. So when Phil Steele said, he thought that this was Jim Harbaugh's best team, and he had him in the top 5, and he has him making the college football playoff, I was in lockstep with him. I can see that. There's not a lot of weaknesses on this team. They've got a cornerback 2 that they've got to deal with, but they've thrown the transfer portal and come up big there again, where they have
absolutely
an answer, and they've got hit the transfer portal with 2 kickers, maybe a kicker punter. So, and a guy that's kicked for years. So they feel pretty good, I think, about where everything is at. The only thing you can say, and people say this a lot, is that historically, whether you want to go back, 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years, is that when Michigan is ranked, really close to the top, and they have those expectations, they actually haven't come through. In 97, they were ranked 14th in the preseason, and Sporting News came out infamously and said that the M stands for mediocrity, but then they went number 1. And then 2 years ago, they were the first team to make the college football playoff unranked at the start of the season. So there's a lot there. I do think, though, even though I'd have Michigan number 2, whoever wins against LSU and Florida State that Sunday on Labor Day, I would vote them number 1, almost out of hand as I sit here right now. So I'll be dropping Georgia and I'll be dropping Michigan after week 1 of the college football season.
Wow. Okay. Well, yeah, it's interesting. On the one hand, I kind of like that everybody is saying, hey, Georgia could three-peat and things like that, because with that, Michigan does its best, like I think you said, kind of as an underdog. And so the fact that the FPI kind of had Ohio State winning, being more likely to be in the playoff, the fact that Georgia seems to be the most likely to be in the playoff and the national championship. I mean, Michigan kind of feeds on that. And so even though most people think Michigan's in the top 4 or 5 this year, there's still nuggets that Harbaugh can pin to the bulletin board and things like that. People saying that their wide receivers aren't amazing. And let's be honest. I mean, the wide receiver talent, if you compare it to Ohio State, that's probably the one area on the entire football team that I'm like, I'm a little shaky. Because everywhere else, like you said, Michigan's one of the only ones with a returning quarterback, period. So you think of Talia as maybe the second best, but almost everybody has a quarterback question. And Kyle McCord, I'm sorry, but with the game tape on him that we've seen so far, and the spring game and everything that we've seen so far, I just don't see him as being better than JJ right now in any universe.
Yeah, half the teams in the NFL, I don't think could stand up to Ohio State's wide receivers room. So, I mean, that's they're the best in college football. We know that. So they've had that going. I think Michigan's pass catchers are a little bit underrated. I think it happens because they don't throw the ball as much as other teams. And, they're 2 superstars. Immediately, you're going to say Blake Corum, and you're going to say Donovan Edwards. And Colston Loveland might be their best pass catcher. I don't think he is. I think it's Roman Wilson, who, if McCarthy starts putting the ball on him a little bit earlier in the season last year, those are a lot more yards and a lot more touchdowns and a lot more questions that were answered until, he finally did answer that in the Ohio State game. And, Cornelius Johnson, he was a little bit inconsistent last year, but he came out of the biggest game. So, I kind of think that Michigan's a little bit underrated there, especially when you put Loveland and what you expect from him in a pass catching role and going to have him in the receiving core. He's basically a wide receiver, souped up wide receiver, and a Brock Bowers type. Brock Bowers is great, but, you hope that Loveland could be that kind of difference maker for Michigan. I think he can.
Absolutely. And Donovan Edwards. Donovan Edwards can catch the ball when he's healthy, like very few others, and I think probably one of the best receiving running backs we have in our sport right now. I think the only reason he's not up there with Loveland and Rowan Wilson, and even some people say Cornelius Johnson because of Ohio State, but I think the only reason he's not right up there in consideration is the injury he had, and so I think. Look out. If he's fully healed, look out. Donovan Edwards.
Yeah, it wasn't just his right hand. Apparently he was, playing on one leg too, had a little discomfort with his knee. So, and he was banged up last year. Yeah, I didn't mention him as a pass catcher, and he has had some pretty big games receiving. And, I don't know how hot of a take it is, but if I'm ranking, it sounds really like, and boy, it's a real Michigan take. I think the best two backs in the country, not the two best backs in the Big Ten. I think the two best backs in the country is Blake Corum, number 1, and Donovan Edwards, number 2. I know that Ole Miss has a great running back. I see what they have at Florida State, Ohio State, Penn State, but Donovan Edwards, when you just look and think what he can do in the NFL, you already mentioned it, dual threat type of ability. That's what they want. And, I think you put him there. It wouldn't surprise me if at the end of the season, it's not like people are way down on him or anything. He's popping up a top 10, even top 5 list, but I'll put him right up there. 1 and number 2, Michigan, the best 2 running backs in the country.
And this guy here, Jackson Johnson, he's a Bama fan. And he's saying that Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards will be the best running back duo in 2023. So this is coming from a Bama fan.
Yeah, well, I watched, Alabama. They're one of those that you put 1, 2, 3, 4, and thanks. We're really looking forward to Gibbs, who the Lions took. Seeing what he's going to be able to do with the Lions offense. But yeah, it would be great if Michigan got to a point where doesn't matter who they're throwing out there. You're like, man, this guy. Alabama does that all the time. They'll get 2 guys hurt. Next thing you know, they're bringing up, 3rd and 4th stringers. Say, hey, these guys are better than 1st stringers. That'd be nice deal.
It would. Well, this is a reminder, folks. When you're doing your shopping on Amazon, as many do from time to time. It's been Prime Day recently. You might as well get Mark Rogers a couple of bucks. Amazon link in the description of every video that we do. So when you're doing your shopping, no additional fee. Use the link. Get yourself some whatever you need for your summer, and do that. Help us out. Continue the guests that we're getting and the content that we're doing, not just on Michigan, but across all of our channels and the main channel as well. So we appreciate that. So the other day on the Big Ten Live show, I was slated to go on at 8 p.m. Because normally I do the 8 p.m. block called the Ocho. And I was actually going to bring on a guest. I don't know if you know Go Blue Lexi. I was going to bring her on. So now she's going to be on. Yeah, she's awesome. She's going to be on next week now because we kind of had extreme breaking news. And Mark stayed on the show because he was supposed to leave. He stayed on the show to cover the breaking news that Pat Fitzgerald is no longer the head coach of Northwestern. And so names all over have been thrown around. Mark says he's up to 29 names. And, we've heard of people like, former Stanford head coaches and Al Gold and, some of these guys. And Sherrone Moore is a name that has been thrown out there in some of the media that I've seen. And, he's been kind of building up to head coach status. Maybe even could have been a head coach this year, but decided to come back to try to help Michigan win a national championship. So what's your take on Sherrone Moore maybe taking that step after this year? I'm hoping they do a search first, let Michigan go through to the postseason, and then they make an announcement. But what's your take on Sherrone Moore as a candidate?
Yeah, well, Sherrone Moore was almost the head coach at Michigan last year if Harbaugh would have come to terms with the Vikings. And I don't know how close you thought he was to doing it. He was pretty close. And Moore was going to be the guy for Michigan. And as you know, Harbaugh has not signed that new contract. So he has a low buyout. So we could be going through that dance again. So Sherrone Moore is going to want to take a look. I think he would rather have the Michigan job. No offense to Northwestern. But yeah, I think if I was putting together a list, if Sherrone Moore would be on it, I don't think he would be in the top 5. Number 1 with a bullet, and the obvious is going with the former Northwestern Wildcat quarterback, Mike Kafka, who worked with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. He went to Buffalo and worked with Josh Allen. He worked with Danny Dimes this year. And now, Danny Dimes is like everybody's talking about. He's been reinvented and look at him. So if you could get Kafka, if you're Northwestern, That would be about as, I mean, that's a grand slam for them. That would be, say, next Pat Fitzgerald, but he'd be like their Jim Harbaugh, especially since he was a quarterback. So he would be number one. Dave Clawson at Wake Forest and Matt Campbell at Iowa State. You know, if Harbaugh, it could have happened after the pandemic season. If Michigan would have gone elsewhere, I think they would have gone with Matt Campbell. If Iowa State has a good year, if Wake Forest has a good year, I would put both of Clawson and Campbell up there. But thinking about how this is going to play out, I mean, this is only, I don't know, hours old, weeks, not a weeks, days old. You start thinking about the lawsuits that are going to, you know, be coming Northwestern's way and what's going to happen in Evanston with the civil lawsuits. If I had to bet on it, I think Braun, their defensive coordinator that came over from North Dakota State, Dave Braun, who was their DC, who's now going to be the acting head coach. We'll see how he handles everything, but I think, you don't count against, don't count him out, but those would be some of the ones. But then, Sherrone Moore, since the first time I've ever seen him walk up to the podium, some people have it. I wish I had it, where you just captivate the room. He's got charisma. It's not like, he is a good communicator and a good speaker, but I don't know. There's some people that have that special quality, and he has it. And the first time I saw him, I said, that guy's going to be a head coach. I didn't even know what kind of coach he was going to be, but just based on how he communicated and just how he directed the room, he's got that CEO style up there. So, they could do a lot worse than Sherrone Moore. Northwestern, in some regards, seems like it'd be the greatest job in the world. Where it's located, outside of Chicago, you don't have great expectations. You just, once in a while, you get to 500 and, they'll throw you a party, get ready to build you a statue. But I don't know, with what's going on, recruiting's already difficult because of the academics. And now this situation, and then to add on, they're not going to be in the Big Ten West anymore. They're going to combine, I think. I know that's not official, but I think everybody thinks that's going to happen. So suddenly they're going to have to play everyone. You're going to be in the basement. Maybe you can't turn down a 7-8 year deal of $30 or $40 million or more, but it kind of feels like, you take that job, you're probably not going anywhere else unless you pull off a Fitzgerald, which is very difficult to do, as we saw.
And, some folks are pointing to this gentleman, Brian Hartline.
Good.
And I think it's primarily Michigan fans doing this, but so I did read a few non-Michigan fans saying it because of the recruiting ability that he has. I think it's a long shot, folks, but never stop dreaming.
He is the best recruiter. Like, I don't know. I was going to say best recruiter. He's a great recruiter. So why would it be a long shot unless Day loses to Michigan and they start calling him John Cooper, and then Hartline would be like Sherrone Moore in line to be the Ohio State coach. But if Day's going to stay around and they feel like, he really is the answer, there's only so many jobs, and Hartline, I could see him, he should be on some kind of list as well, just because of that recruiting.
Yeah. Plan. I mean, he is a great recruiter. I think at the number one, I don't think he wants the job. I think he wants the Ohio State job, right? And so I don't see Ryan Day sticking it out for 10 or 20 years when every year the fan base is like sending Venmo, like hate to the players, and people are like, one loss. The guy has had 2 Big Ten losses his entire career. I'm defending Ryan Day right now. He's had 2 Big Ten losses. And yet when I was on the Buckeye podcast and stuff right after because of course I had to soak that in right after the Michigan win in 2022, the amount of calls for Ryan Day's job for 1 loss, 2 total. I know they're to Michigan, but how can you possibly fire somebody when he's had 2 Big Ten losses his entire career? It kind of boggles my mind. So that's a consideration.
The thing is, you just have to go back and look at history. John Cooper was the greatest recruiter, and he had great teams at Ohio. Not good teams. He had great teams. And of course, he couldn't beat Michigan. And with Day, he comes in and it's a really good spot and he does well. And like the transition is seamless. He looks awesome. He's even bringing pro concepts in there. But yeah, losing to Michigan, and it's not just losing to Michigan. You get tripped up, Sean Spring slips, and somebody goes 80 yards and you lose a game there. You shank a field goal like they did this year. You get that. But Michigan, they only scored 3 points in the second half at home. I mean, that was a disaster. And they got manhandled. Michigan balled up their fist and punched him in the mouth. And it was 2 years in a row. And after 21, Day stood up there and told everybody, we're going to get tough. They brought Jim Knowles in, defensive coordinator. Physicality is the name of the game and all that. And then they got roundhoused again. So it's not just losing, it's getting dominated the way they did. And so, but I don't think, it is knee jerk. I know I'm acting like I'm, sending him out the door. It's knee jerk after 2 years, but 3 years. And if he goes up to Ann Arbor this year and they get manhandled again and Michigan's running up and down the field, then, Ohio State fans know how this series has worked. Ohio State wins, 10 out of 12. Michigan wins, 10 out of 11. And then it would really feel like it's flipped around. I know how it feel like it's flipped around if Michigan goes for some three-peat. It would feel like that. I think you'd pull out a lot of people in Ann Arbor saying, hey, yeah, keep Day around. It's only been 3 years. Let's go. Yeah,
right. Then you start having the same thing that they were saying about Harbaugh, like get him a lifetime contract and stuff back in like 2020. The same type of reactions the other way around. But, I think I threw this out. I forget which show. I think it was the Buckeye Mike show. Because I'm doing that with him to do like a Michigan versus Ohio State every week. I'm going to be doing that with him. And one of the things I kind of threw out there is that if Ohio State loses to Notre Dame with McCord, then that could be a real problem for Michigan, because then the chance of a benching for Devin Brown is real. If they get destroyed, or even if they lose by a couple of touchdowns to Notre Dame, maybe McCord throws some picks, and Devin Brown comes in as the starting quarterback for the Michigan game, who I think is more of a dual threat. I think he is harder to defend against based on what I've seen from both players. Then the route to beating Michigan could be losing to Notre Dame. So I don't really even know who to root against in that game, because either way,
Well, the thing, if I'm an Ohio State fan, yeah, you're looking at that game and, you're going to be upset if you lose. I just look, they do so well in recruiting. Like You would think that they should be. It gets back to the Ryan Day. You would think that they would be right there every year. And just in the talent that they have at quarterback, at wide receiver, we already talked about that. But then you watch the defense play, and, I watch them against Penn State, and, some of the one guy, JTT, that was one of the greatest games I've ever seen by a defender. I didn't see him at all against Michigan, a safety.
Right.
This guy's 5-star safety, number 12. I mean, he's shying away. JJ McCarthy gets to the goal line. You're supposed to be popping him and sending him, into downtown Columbus. Instead, the guy rose up his hands.
Right.
He thought they were playing against USC. But I don't even think the defense this year is the biggest question mark. That offensive line, they lost some, and I know they got some guys in here, but I question Ohio State on both sides of the line and just how tough they are. They've got talent. Yeah. They've got more talent than anybody in the country. Maybe Alabama or Clemson wants to stand up and say, our talent's better. All right. They've got great talent, and they keep getting in. That's why FPI and everybody loves them, because they keep ringing the bell on all these formulas, because they're always number one, number two, number three in recruiting. But the coaching isn't where it needs to be down in Columbus with the kind of talent that they're getting. And Michigan's exposed it the last 2 years.
Absolutely. Their talent, that's why, even though they're ahead in the recruiting battle currently, I'm not sweating it much, because it hasn't mattered head to head on the field. They've had 5 stars every year. So that's a key. So I was going to mention this later, but since Jason Moose has given us a contribution, $2 super chat, I guess now I should be calling him back-to-back Big Ten champs, which also a great name. Aaron Scott seen wearing Michigan gear at the 7-on-7. Was that actually Michigan gear, or was that the school? I feel like that might have been the school colors, the high school, right?
Well, I don't know. Like, I don't know if it means anything or not. These guys
Yeah.
get a lot of gear, and if I had a ton of Michigan gear and I was going to Ohio State, I might say now's the time to wear the Michigan stuff, because after the end of the month, I'm not going to be able to wear it anymore. Could be
Right.
that. But when
Could
I read
be.
the story about him, I know his high school's got the same colors as Michigan.
Same colors, yeah.
So, the gloves and the shoes, you can get that. But then, the story I read said that he was wearing a Michigan hat too. So there's no like, hey, this is the colors. You're putting on a Michigan hat.
Michigan hat, yeah.
And I know his dad's birthday is on the same day that he's going to be picking his school. And you know what? If you love Ohio State, Aaron Scott Sr., and your kid's coming to you and you said, hey, Dad, are you going to who's picking? Is it a kid? Is dad? What's going on here? So I don't know. If I had to pick, I think that Scott, I wouldn't get my hopes up from a Michigan fan, but it is something to at least monitor. Michigan's got a barbecue at the end of the year. At the end of the month. If he's going to that, I'll feel a little bit better about him, throwing some gloves or, making a smiley face with his hand, with Michigan. I've seen all that. Justin Scott was up there holding the sign about how much he loved Michigan and
right,
blue and those who stay and everything else. And then he went to Ohio State.
Yeah, it can be maybe it's mixed signals. I think you mentioned on your show today. I tried to catch some of it in between client meetings, and I believe you were saying you were thinking probably 85 to 90% probably Ohio State, or 80% Ohio State, 10% Michigan, 10% Oregon. Is that kind of?
That's almost exactly right. I changed it by the end of the show as I talked.
Oh, okay.
Through it. I had it 80% Ohio State, and then 9% Michigan, and I put them at 11% Oregon. So I got Michigan down there. It just seemed like that was the way to go after talking through it. Those are my numbers where I'm at.
Yeah, and I think it's a long shot for sure. I will say that moving the date back from the 4th to the 30th, while I understand that his dad is an Ohio State fan, you're giving Clinkscale and the staff 26 more days to talk to him. That's also a side piece of all this, is that that it might have been Ohio State on the 4th, and now Clinkscale is 26 more days, or maybe it's the reverse. Maybe he was a little bit more Michigan and he's giving Ohio State a chance. I'm not really sure, but I just think it's interesting that he pushed it back.
Well, I didn't go out. I'm trusting this is something you shouldn't do. I'm trusting people on the internet that say, one, that his dad's a big Ohio State fan. That doesn't seem like a big leap. They live in Ohio. So
right.
That part. But then they're also saying that it's his birthday. I didn't go check to see if Aaron Scott Sr.'s birthday is on July 30th. But, if it is, that makes me think the kid's going to Ohio State. But,
right.
That's my thought process on it.
Yeah. So Jason's saying, Oregon was just a fill-in for his top 3. Oregon is a school that has gotten some QBs and some other players too, including defense. So, now some of them have also transferred out. So I'm thinking of specifically Dante Moore, which we were all so upset. Remember, and then he decides to transfer over to UCLA. So yeah, they've had kind of an interesting recruiting history.
Well, you have to remember it, and Jason will know this, and you will too. Scott, if he's thinking between his head and heart, it might be Michigan, Ohio State, but Oregon can make you think with your pocketbook.
Right.
They could come in late, make a big offer. They have been known to do that. Yeah, it was interesting how UCLA went over the top and was able to get him there, and even outspend, beat Oregon at their own game, which was interesting. But yeah, that's why Scott, he's smart. If he's playing between Michigan and Ohio State, and he's keeping a line open for Oregon and saying, I don't know, maybe I'm that's the way to do it. Maybe their offer will, maybe they'll make one a final offer, and it'll be, sometimes it's an offer that's too good to be true.
Get that Phil Knight money going. Who knows? So don't forget that we're talking Wolverines all the time on our Discord chat. 24/7, 365, as well as all the other schools and things like that. When you join patreon.com/MarkRogersTV, $5 a month. And we're going to be putting out exclusive content just for Patreon people and for YouTube members as well. So we did a few weeks ago, we actually had a watch party for the 2019 Clemson-Ohio State game. And so you had some Clemson people on there, some Ohio State people, and I was kind of on as a neutral, kind of a little bit kind of a Clemson fan for that one. But yeah, no, it was a great game. And so we'll be doing more of those. And as we get to the season, Mark puts out a betting guide with a bunch of different media people on there. So there's betting guides, there's exclusive content, there's all kinds of stuff, and you can be part of it for just a couple of bucks a month, and it helps support the channel. So why not? Underrated. So we found out that JJ McCarthy, this College Sports Wire, USA Today, we saw that he was ranked number 9 QB in the country based on, I believe it was last year's QBR is what they used as the rankings there to determine. So I've heard 9 in a couple of places. I believe even Voice of College Football, Mark Rogers, I think he put him at 9. So I'm thinking, after you get Caleb and you get, maybe you put Michael Penix up there, but I'm trying to fill 3 to 9 out to eventually get to JJ's 9. I'm thinking to myself, I just don't, I think he's going to surprise people this year. I really do. What do you think?
I think a lot of those guys that are ranking it might just look at his jersey number and say, hey, let's put him at number 9. No, I think you can make a case. And I'm not going to bash people that make their lists. I know how difficult it is. But I do think if you are putting together a list and you're using Pro Football Focus and you look at J.J. McCarthy, you're like, I might think J.J. McCarthy might be a top 5 quarterback. And then you start looking at Pro Football Focus, you're like, wait a second, they don't have him in the top 10. They don't have him in the top 20. They don't have him in the top 50. I don't think they had him in the top 100 last year when you go through and you look at J.J. McCarthy. And so you understand that the numbers are not there in Pro Football Focus. They don't like them. And Michigan's identity was their running game. And if I'm going to be honest, if I looked at last year, and JJ played well in a number of games, so this is not anything against him, but I think they really only needed him. I think Cade McNamara could have taken Michigan undefeated into the Ohio State game, but I think the 2.5 quarters against Ohio State, he played great football. And still in that game, I don't remember who the writer was for CBS, but it was in this off season. He was ranking the quarterbacks, and he said that, McCarthy didn't have a good game that game. Well, if you look at just the stat line, his completion percentage was 50%. So you look at that, and then the other time that you probably watched him was in the college football semifinal where he threw the 2 pick sixes. And I can see why people, would be down on him. But you mentioned him. Caleb Williams, I'm going to take in front of J.J. McCarthy. And I'm
anybody.
Michael Penix Jr. all the way back to Indiana. The first time I saw him spinning the ball, I'm like, that guy's an NFL quarterback. And, I would put him. But I think Drake May's got a little Trubisky vibe to me. I don't know if he's ever beat anybody that's any good. Every time I watch him, whether it's against Oregon or the last 4 games of the year, NC State, they lose every game that he plays. So I know that he's got all the measurables and they love him and everything else. But I'll take J.J. McCarthy in front of Drake May. I looked at that list. The guy at Kansas was a great story, Daniels and everything, but I'm not going to take Daniels over J.J. McCarthy. Frank Harris, I can't say that I've watched him play, the kid from Texas.
I haven't,
something. So I wouldn't know him if he walked up, slapped me in the face, but
right.
What can I say? I'm going to take him over J.J. McCarthy, and I've seen enough of Bo Nix. I'm not making that deal either. So I think J.J.'s in the top 5, and because of those things, he doesn't throw the ball. He only threw the ball over 30 times, 3 times last year, not much. And so he's normally the pass attempts are down, and he really didn't start clicking with a downfield passing game until the Ohio State game. In fact, he was missing guys, let's say left and right, but when they did take some shots during the year, that was an obvious hole in his game. He wasn't putting the ball on the receiver. He started getting it against Ohio State. He did it in the Big Ten championship game. And then, whatever you want to say about TCU, the 2 pick sixes were terrible. He was throwing it around pretty good after that and a little bit before some of that. But I'll put him in the top 5 if I'm making a ranking. And you'll say, well, you work for the Maize and Blue Review. And I'll say, all right, that's fair. But I just walked through all those other guys. I think Travis from Florida State, he's an interesting one. I might put him in front of McCarthy. And I didn't see in their top 10 the quarterback from LSU, Jaden Daniels. I like him. I think I would put him in my top 5 over a lot of those guys that they had. So I would have a different top 5 than the guy from CBS Sports. And I can't wait to that first weekend when LSU plays Florida State, because you are going to have Jordan Travis and Jaden Daniels. A lot of people are going to say, hey, these guys are underrated, whoever ends up winning that game, whatever quarterback does.
Most likely. Yeah, it's always a little easier to do that when you win. Dennis Lang, the team, absolutely. And speaking of that, if you go to the Voice of College Football merch store, there is a Michigan section, so you can get yourself some Michigan, things like pint glasses and shirts and things like that. And we now have on the merch store keychains and coasters. And if you put in the promo code football, you get free shipping. So get yourself you have those spare keys lying around. Maybe you need a coaster every now and then. You get yourself one of those and rep Voice of College Football. So this is an interesting one here. You mentioned him on your show as well, Jacob Smith. I know that recruiting has been, the last couple of days has been a bit of a hot topic. But Jacob Smith, he's a player that I think can really do some stuff for the university. And so he is announcing his commitment tomorrow. And we, of course, had the Maize and Blue Review, talking about that a little bit. And you talked about it on your show. So I've got some film up here from his junior season. But this is somebody who is the number 14 ranked edge in the country. 20 offers, including Alabama, Georgia, Nebraska. So some really top schools offering him. What do you think in terms of his impact that he could bring to Michigan and their defense?
Well, he looks like a great athlete, and he's got that size and the edge position right now for Michigan. They've really got it going. So, I see the incredible athleticism, and, he looks like he got great jumps off the ball there, being able to get into the backfield before anybody else moves. He kind of looks like he's a tick faster than everybody else that's out there, and he can tackle, and he was going back in pass coverage. So you see why the gurus like him so much. I like him to go to Michigan because his twin brother is going to Michigan.
Right.
And I know that he has indicated that wasn't going to be the biggest reason, and he could blaze his own path and all those other things. But I do think that he's going to pick Michigan when, twins. At some point they do. The Pistons and the Rockets. They the Thompson twins and those guys. Every time they were interviewed, it was like interviewing the same guy. They finally forced them where they had to go somewhere else. Until you're forced and you're twins, I think those guys stay together. And I think that Jacob Smith tomorrow will pick Michigan.
It sounds like, you don't even see any other warm potentials when you look at 247. And I think that's an indicator. Our buddy, back-to-back Big Ten champs. I have to get used to that now. Finally, I was wondering what was taking him so long to commit. A lot of these people, and maybe you have a specific reason for him in particular, but a lot of these recruits, they want their moment in the spotlight. They want to get their deal with whoever, whether it's a big player who, remember Jaden Davis was on, I believe it was ESPN, and gave his announcement on ESPN. So they want to do their deal with whichever publisher or channel is gonna have their thing on. And so everybody wants their, especially these 4 and 5 star players. So I know that that's at least one factor why sometimes it takes a little longer than we expect, but I don't know if you know anything specifically about this one.
Well, I do know that he said he wanted to be the recruiting process. He wanted it different than his brother, so
Okay.
they are twins, but it's not like he wanted to commit on the same day, the same thing and everything else. I mean, they did visit together and make the rounds in Ann Arbor. So they did have that. Who knows what any kid, I mean, every kid is different. I would think it's hard for me to put myself in a 18-year-old shoes. That's like, great college football player. But right off the bat, even if I was going to Michigan, I would visit Miami, Hawaii, Southern California. I'd go see the country. But you talk to enough of the kids and they go around and they talk with the coaches and they end up liking all of them. And it becomes, they're torn and then they hate it because they don't want to feel like they're leading somebody on. So all of them can come around with different reasons. I do think that Smith tomorrow will end up going to Michigan and joining his brother. And, then Michigan, they don't have the ultimate 5-star when you take a look at the edge, but the Smith brothers, Cole Sullivan was out there.
Cole Sullivan. Oh, boy.
They've got some Devon Baxter, who I just saw that, he seems like he's his status is elevating. They got quite a few. Nichols was also another edge. All those guys, I think, are 4-stars right now across the board. So it's looking good. The future looks good for Michigan, especially at that position.
Absolutely. And of course, we've got the lock emoji. So it's official. The Jason Moose big back-to-back Big Ten champs lock emoji. So we'll see if that comes true. But it is looking pretty likely for Michigan at this point. 2 reminders. So tomorrow we begin with we're starting something new on Voice of College Football where fans, and I'm going to be the first, are going to be playing the college football video games and playing through the 2023 schedule. So tomorrow here at 6 p.m. Eastern is the first game, Michigan versus Rutgers on John Plays the Season. So I don't want to spoil anything. I think Michigan fans will be pretty happy. But that's all I'm going to say about it. So check it out. I think you're going to enjoy it. It's just a little different from how we've been doing it with the simulations and stuff. So check that out. And then on Mondays, Monday Big Ten Live, this coming Monday, we've got Lexi is going to be coming on the Ocho Big Ten Live, host of Locked In with Lexi. And we're going to be talking about some betting stuff. We're going to be talking about over-unders. Not just with Michigan, but actually with the Big Ten West and the emergence of some of these coaches, including Fickle and Rule and some of that stuff. So it's going to be some good content. I recommend everybody check it out. It's the Ocho Big Ten Live. So let's have this as our kind of finale topic here, and it's one that we've had on the show quite a few weeks. We've talked about it, and one of the reasons why I wanted to reach out to you and really get this booked is, I was hearing your take on NIL and just in general, it's been an ongoing conversation, right? Why can't, Michigan does so great with 4 stars and coaching them up and 3 stars and coaching them up. But this year, for some reason, the 5 stars have decided last second, let's go to Florida. Let's go to Ohio State. Let's go to this school. And, the Justin Scott decision, when I was pretty sure he was either coming to Michigan or going to Notre Dame, and then he decided to go to Ohio State. Do you think here that there is a factor that Michigan just won't give upfront money, period, to anybody? And so they kind of keep themselves out of the running from these 5 stars. What do you think the truth is there? And what have you been seeing?
Well, that's what it appears. And I think Michigan, it's a strategy. It's not just that they're sitting back saying, hey, we are not crossing this line whatsoever. Although the fan base really likes that they're saying that. So I do think that they do. I think it works both ways. The fans like that. Hey, Michigan's, they're not going to stoop to that level. They're not going to pay the upfront money. They're not giving signing bonuses. They're going to do everything else that they can above board, but they're not going to do that. The fans are eating it up. Plus, it's working with Michigan right now. You can say whatever you want about NIL, and 5 stars down the road, it doesn't look great. But last year, they were able to keep Blake Corum. They were able to keep Trevor Keegan, Zach Center.
Yes.
Those guys would have been gone to the pros. The defense,
yes, they would have.
Jenkins would have been gone. I wouldn't have been surprised to see Sandra still, making the leap. These guys would have been out of there. Michigan.
The one more year fund.
Well, they were able to keep those guys. So I think thinking about hanging in there with U of M, the best thing they can do is continue to win. If they can do that, I think this plan is going to work. I mean, that might sound obvious, but I think on the player side, if you are a top 100 kid, if you are a 5-star, I think it would be really easy to say, hey, I've earned this money. Like, nobody cares. In the 2 years, nobody has done anything except the twins down at Miami who are on a video, I think basically, with the money in their hand or in the pocket.
Right.
So nobody's is enforcing anything. So, they say, why not? Why not take the money when it comes down to it? And the other part about it is that last year at this time, it wasn't just me. There were a lot of people that were crying about Michigan and the transfer portal. Michigan's not going to be able to get anybody because their admissions. Ward Manuel is screwing everything up. Mm-hmm. Oh, no, I don't know what he can do. This is going to cost Michigan. Between the NIL and the transfer portal, Michigan's going to get screwed. Michigan's hit the transfer portal for the jackpot. They've got 10 players this year, and they're going to have more than 5 or 6 of them, are going to be pretty big impact, led by Drake Nugent right there snapping the ball. But you can just keep going down the list of the different guys that they got. I think Josiah Stewart, he looked really good. I don't take too much out of a spring game. He looks like a hell of a player. I wouldn't be surprised if he's an impact edge guy. So my point here, it's a long answer, is that I think it's a strategy by Michigan. If they keep winning, they keep doing all these things like, hey, we've got this collective, we've got that collective. And a lot of it can get confusing to me, but I think they just keep throwing stuff out there. It's a fluid situation with everyone. And Michigan, I know they've hired somebody specifically from their business school that's looking at this. I don't think those guys are just sitting around with their feet in the air, with the buffet and everything. They're strategizing on how to, get Michigan and how to get those top players. But if they keep winning, and if they can combine a transfer portal and a top 10, 15 recruiting class, and, it makes you feel like it's a top 5 one, who cares if they're not getting, Justin Scott? And I'll tell you this about Ohio State. If they look soft against Michigan and Donovan Edwards is running like he was in the fourth quarter up and down the field and Blake Gordon's 100%, half of those 5 stars are going to be in the transfer portal and a couple of them are going to come to Michigan.
And that's the other side of it, right? Because when you look at schools where in Texas A&M's case, it was literally called, I don't know if you watched that video where the recruiter was saying, look at these people up on there. They're all going to be funding you, basically. I think that's the most blatant we've seen it, other than the Jalen Rashada $13 million NIL thing. I'd say having it be on video that, this is their pitch. But then notice the exodus. So after they secure, however they secured those commits at Texas A&M and Miami and other places, well, now they're transferring to the school that they want to go to, right? And so that is the flip side is, Michigan's selling, if you do well on the field, we have this new Empower initiative, the Empower, and bring, having a stipend once you get on. So I think Harbaugh was saying like, well, we don't want anybody eating the ramen noodles and not being able to get anywhere. We treat them like our kids. We want them to have the ability to get places and eat, and they don't have to eat the ramen noodles every day. And I think that that's a solid way to look at it. Like, make sure that people have a decent quality of life while they're at the school and, busting it for the football team. Right. But, maybe that's kind of the line that they want to go. The only caveat I'd say is that in the playoffs, what I've seen is look at the teams that do the best in the playoffs: Alabama, Georgia, Clemson back in the 2018 more so than 2016. There's really only 3 that have won the title with a lower blue chip ratio. And I was looking at this because I was like, I know that there's been teams with less of a blue chip than Michigan who won. And I came up with Auburn 2010, FSU 2013, and Clemson 2016 did have a lower blue chip ratio. They had elite quarterback play. So the question Mark and I discussed before is, if JJ can make that leap to an elite quarterback play, because that seems to be the way you can win a title in the recent era without having a bunch of 5 stars all over the field.
Yeah, great quarterback play. I think you guys hit it right on the nose. And I do think that the transfer portal now, all that stuff previously, you are correct, but being able to blend the transfer portal in there and then continuing to just look at this thing and tease it and find spots where, you can take advantage of some of the rules in the gray area. And, hell, who knows, with a 12-team playoff and, maybe these things are going to be changing around. And, you're always adjusting and trying to figure out how you can do it and get that talent. You need that talent. I mean, I'm trying to beat around the bush and everything else. At some point, they are going to have to be pulling those guys in, because if the NIL started 4 years ago, it doesn't seem like Donovan Edwards and J.J. McCarthy and some of these other guys would I know they got Will Johnson, but, he was a legacy guy and his dad played at Michigan. I don't know how many guys they're getting outside the state of Michigan if, this was going to be their strategy. But, it's fluid, keep winning, and they've been impressive, even when it looked like last year that, oh, my God, they don't know what they're doing. Here they are, and I got to say that they do look like they know what they're doing right now. So,
absolutely. So real quick, we're gonna ask everybody to sub to you and everything else. But before we do that, I just want to remind everybody that if you liked this and you like college football content on the Voice of College Football, today is what I like to call the must-see TV blocks. So I stole that from one of the networks. Hopefully they don't come after me. But basically, right up next is Florida State live at 6 p.m. On the Florida State channel. Miami at 7. Big 12 Media Days call-in show at 8. And then the Pac-12 chat show live at 10:30 p.m. Eastern today. So there is a lot of content coming up for you. If you like your college football content on July 12th, like many of us here in the community, it just keeps going all night long. So we're rolling here at the Voice of College Football. So I'll just post the link to Florida State so everybody can go over and just give them a like, give them some love over there as they kind of get rocking and rolling. So that's question for you is, once again, we obviously, for those of you who are joining very late, some people come at the end. We do have Dennis FITHIAN, who's been our special guest today. And just if you can remind everybody, where they can find you. It's been awesome having you, man.
Yeah, well, if you're watching, you look right down there at Twitter, at Dennis FITHIAN, at the Maize and Blue Review, the Michigan Rivals. I do a show a couple times a week, live at 1 o'clock. Once the football season gets going into August, I've been doing it every day at 1 o'clock. And so we're talking about the latest in Michigan sports there. So come along, join in, and we're an interactive show. We're reading your feedback as it comes in, questions, comments, and we don't test to see if you're a Michigan fan. You can come in. We take on all comers.
There you go. So, and we have all comers here at the community. So you might see a couple more SEC people joining the show, or some more, a couple of Buckeyes or whatever. So it might not just be Michigan people. So as long as you're cool with it, I'm sure some of them will hop over.
I've been practicing for Georgia and Alabama, so I'm ready. I think I can step up my game. And so I love college football, and at the end of it, even though I like to, go after Ohio State fans, we're all college football fans, and this is fun. Let's do it.
It's a good time, and seriously, Michigan and Ohio State is probably the greatest rivalry in college football. Anyway, I mean, it's so fun to hate them, and so we have a great time going back and forth. So anyway, again, Dennis, really appreciate you coming on, and I hope everybody goes and checks out Maize and Blue Review. I know I try to catch it as often as I can during my lunch breaks. If I can get away from client meetings for a bit, I stop by. So check that out. And Until next time, everybody, I always end with this. Go Blue, and thanks for watching.